Welcome back. So I talked a lot of bad things about Bitwig Studio in the recent videos, or let's not say bad things, but I had some criticism for certain topics here and there, and I guess that's okay. But with this video, I want to focus on the good parts. I want to show you why I love Bitwig Studio, why I use it or still use it, why you should use it too, and why it's great for beginners. And the biggest feature for me still, no matter what they implement in terms of specific features, which I not really like most of the times because it's tailored to one specific workflow, which I don't use, which I don't need, and so on. So the biggest feature for me still is modularity. And I don't talk about this kind of normal modularity. I talk about hands-on modularity, which is something you can do on the fly, on the get-go. You have, or you create a track, you create a song, you create a sound, and you need something unique. And in Bitwig, you can create a unique instrument, unique audio effect on the fly without going into coding, scripting, or other visual languages like Max DSP. You can do it on the fly with ease and with fun. And also at the same time, you learn how certain VST instruments work and how to replace them and how to make them unique. That's very important in my opinion, that you have unique instruments because most of the times people use the same VST instruments or even the same presets. Everything sounds the same. And also with AI, right, everything sounds the same. So it's boring. So why not create unique audio instruments, audio effects for yourself? And they don't need to be right or, correct. Sometimes it's very interesting when you have something going off the rails. And that's where it gets interesting. Anyway, so I want to give you some basic examples why you should use Bitwig Studio, how I use it and why I think it's great. And it's probably more aimed at beginners or people that are new to Bitwig Studio. So I want to give you here a rough example. So let's say you want to create a track and you need, of course, some kind of sound source and synthesizer. Here we have a very basic one called Polymer. And that's a basic subtractive synthesizer. So we have all the components for subtractive synthesizer. We have an oscillator here, we have a filter, and we have an envelope. We also have an envelope here of the filter, so we can open up the filter over time. We have a sub-oscillator, we have a bit of noise, we have here a low cut, some output gain and panning and so on. And you can see already it's very simple, very basic, but it's modular and you can exchange all the things. So in front of the device, we have here so-called modulators. We can just remove them. Inside of the device itself, we have an oscillator here, which is a wavetable oscillator. And the wavetable oscillator in itself is very modular because we can change the index, we can change the wavetable, right, for a completely different sound. So we can exchange the wavetable, we can modify the wavetable here, remove DC offset, remove the fundamental, which is the lowest partial. Maybe I'll open up here a spectrum analyzer. Spectrum, this one here, and we can open up this in the bigger window. Nice. So we can use here remove fundamental, right? This partial here. Can just remove it, which is really nice to have. We have unison to utilize multiple voices, slightly detuned. Okay, so in itself, the oscillator, the wavetable oscillator is very modular, but we can also exchange the complete thing, right? The whole oscillator here for something else, like a sine oscillator, triangle oscillator, or we can use a scroll where we can draw in our own wave shapes here, something like this. And can play it on the fly. Very nice to have. So we can exchange the oscillator. We can also exchange the filter here. So if we don't like the Salon key filter for some reason, and also the filter itself is kind of modular because we can exchange it, the type, high pass, 8, low pass, whatever you want to use, right? You can exchange it here. Also the non-linearity you can change here. So in itself, the filter is modular, but we can also exchange the filter for something else, like a low pass LD, which is a ladder filter, SVF, which has a low pass, band pass, high pass, notch filter here. Also something like a comp filter with feedback, fizz, rasp, ripple, all the new filters, which also have here force feedback and feedback and feed forward stuff included, right? So we can exchange here the filter. Let's go back here to something normal. We can also exchange the envelope here, right? So something that we can use to change over time. So this is an AD, which is attack decay, but we can exchange this for an ADSR, which is attack decay, sustain and release. Or we can use segments here. So with segments, we can of course then start here to draw our own shapes if we want to use different timing settings here, from hold to minutes, seconds, milliseconds, or timing based, which is then based on the BPM, of course. So all kinds of options, right? Already from the get-go, just using Polymer. But it's still a subtractive synthesizer. We also have options here with the FX boxes, right? Node FX, we can say all the nodes going into the synthesizer here are arpeggiated. And the idea of using this inside of the Node FX box is now that it's part of the Polymer synthesizer. And we can just save this as a preset here and say, I want to use this combination of devices next time when I create a track, right? So instead of having the arpeggiator here in front, where it's not part of the synthesizer itself, just using this here inside of the Node FX box, we can make it part of the synthesizer, so we can save it as a preset. Also post FX box here, so all the sounds going out, we can tweak here with the reverb, convolution reverb, or maybe a delay plus, whatever. Also here, same thing, all the settings, everything that you change in here or you put in there is, if you want to, part of the Polymer synthesizer and can be part of the preset, and you can just reload it every time you need it. And all the effects are in here. And of course, you can use also VST devices. So I usually use here the Supermassive Reverb, which is a VST or clap plugin. And it's part now of the Polymer synthesizer, and you can save it as a preset, and it's there when you need it. Okay, so this is just the normal modularity that you have from the get-go when you use just a normal Bitwig instrument. But it's not the end, it's just the beginning, right? So it still is an subtractive synthesizer kind of. And recently I saw someone on Reddit and said, well, Bitwig needs actually an additive synthesizer where you have multiple sine waves stacked on top of each other, and then you can change the volume. So we can do this too in Bitwig here with this Polymer synthesizer. So now I have just one sine oscillator here, and it's pretty pure because it's just one partial. And with the additive synthesizer, we need multiple sine waves stacked on top. And we can do this very easily in Bitwig by just selecting here the Polymer synthesizer and use voice stacking. So we stack now multiple instances of this Polymer on top of each other. But at the moment, all the sine partials play the same frequency. So it's just louder. Nothing more, nothing less. But we can use now here a stack modulator, stack spread, and we can switch this to value. So you can see the values here on the left side, which voice gets what value, right? Voice 1 gets value 0. So what we can do now with this is we can modulate here the ratio setting of the sine oscillators. We can say +1, which means voice 1 is partial 1, 1, of course, no modulation applied. Voice 2 gets +1. So this is 1 plus 1 is 2. So we go basically up the harmonic series with this. So it looks like this now, right? Instead of this, we have on each voice a different ratio setting. Already with this, we have a modular, or yeah, a modular additive synthesizer. We can do, of course, other things. Instead of modulating here the ratio, which gives you very harmonic responses, we can just change here the pitch offset. Maybe I'll open up the filter a bit more. That's better. So you get also very disharmonic sounds if you want to. But we can also modulate here the ratio setting, not just by 1, which is very harmonic. Let's go. We can also say, let's say, modulate this by 3. So we get some kind of bell sounds out of this. We can combine certain modulations to get certain sounds. But I want to stick here to the harmonic result. Let's use that. So it's still a subtractive synthesizer in a way, because we have a filter here to subtract the overtones. So we can kind of bring down here the harmonic content of this. Maybe I use here the key tracking and then a steep filter. So we can still single out here the one partial to fundamental by using key tracking here, which is exactly the frequency I'm using on the keyboard. But it's not very specific. So what we want to do is we want to change each of these partial in a different way. So what we can do now is we can utilize a step sequencer. Okay, a step sequencer. This step sequencer is usually not made for this. It's actually only there to change over time parameters, right? So when we hit play here, it steps through the pattern, and then we can modulate, for instance, here the filter like this. So not very interesting, but I want to give you an idea what it does. But what we can do now here in Bitwig is we can say hold. Instead of progress through the pattern, hold it in the first position. And then we select here this modulator and go to the left side into the inspector and say per voice. So now it's a polyphonic modulator, which means every voice, and we have 16 voices here, of course, because we are using voice stacking. So every voice now gets its own version, its own instance of this modulator. So at the moment, every version is of course at 0, but we can change this by modulating here the phase modulation thing, right? So with this we can step through the pattern, so go back to 0, but we use here the stack spread for this. So we modulate this here by a certain amount. It's actually 6.5 probably. Yeah, you can see each voice now here is kind of white. So this represents each voice. So instead of using then here this output to change the volume, we use this output to change the volume, and we go down here for the filter. It's actually the filter drives. It's not really the volume. We can change here the volume here if you want to. It doesn't really matter. So we can push this here and use this, for instance. Let's modulate this by 1. So the step modulator here modulates the gain of each voice. Looks like this. So what we now have here is kind of an additive synthesizer, because we can change now the volume of each partial independently and in very specific ways. Okay, we can also use here the randomize or dice button. Very nice. And you also always have here this kind of option to bring in the fundamental to make it rooted in reality, or whatever you want to call it. So this is changing here the volume, so we can give it the name and say volume, right? But why not change also different things? Why only change the volume, right? So we duplicate this here, this modulator, and maybe change the decay setting. Decay. So here we modulate, yeah, the decay. Go back to, that's okay. Maybe something like this. So this now changes decay for each voice, right? We can say, oh, the fundamental has a long relay, long decay, and all the top harmonics here have very short decays. You can hear you can shape the sound in very specific ways, and you can add as many step modules as you want. So we can say this one changes maybe the detuning, so we can detune here this slightly, maybe go for hertz, and also say detune. Doesn't do a big difference here, but you can do it if you want to. We can also say, let's use this here maybe for skew, I don't know, or we can use here phase modulation. So we use the sub oscillator. Yeah, this could be interesting. So this is PM, FM. So we bring the root, this sub-oscillator always plays the fundamental frequency to modulate then basically the overtones in certain ways. So you can do it. It's possible, okay? So this is what I mean basically by this type of stuff. Of course, the interface is not dedicated, right? So when you buy, for instance, an additive synthesizer, you probably have a lot of nice graphical things to access all these overtones. But here you can make it work. You learn actually how it works, and you can tweak it to your own liking. And you can experiment. Maybe it's interesting to modify different things here and create different sounds out of it, and then learn from it, and then maybe code your own VST instrument. I heard some of the VST developers actually use Bitwig sometimes, or the grid sometimes, to test new ideas. Actually, it doesn't sound too bad. So there's a reverb here. Okay, so then we can bring in here an expression modulator. So we have velocity. Of course, we press the keyboard in different amounts of strength. So you can use the velocity to change maybe the decay setting. So here decay changes this one, right? And then we can use the velocity here to change the modulation amount. I don't know how to say it, but we can also change this here. This is also the amount, right? So now when we press the keyboard very softly, decay settings here are basically all the way down. So the sound is very short. And when we press the keyboard very hard, can also make it the other way around, maybe. So the harder we press, the shorter the sound gets, but it's not too short. Maybe we open up here the attack time a bit more, so it's more soft. Not too much, but the harder we press, the shorter the attack time becomes. Maybe bring the filter down. So you can create an additive synthesizer just with a bunch of modulators here in front, or yeah, in front of the device itself. And you can do this also with other synthesizers. You don't need to use the Polymer synthesizer. You can also use the sampler if you want to, right? Also with the sampler, I want to show you something later on in the video. I'm just starting, okay? So this is an additive synthesizer just built from a subtractive synthesizer very easily. So this is voice stacking, but we can also do something else. I showed you this in another video. We can use the wavetable synthesizer, a wavetable oscillator here. And instead of using here a normal wavetable, I use my DC offset wavetable, which is basically just 0, -1, then the value is 0, and then +1. So it's basically a DC offset. So if you don't know what DC offset means, I show you this here very quickly. Just as, maybe I'll just remove it for now. We have a DC offset device here in Bitwig. It looks like this. And all it does is, when you send it out to an audio interface, and you move the slider up or the slider down, is to change the voltage on your speaker cone. So this is basically pushing your speaker cone out, and this is pushing your speaker cone in. So it changes the voltage of your speaker cone. So you usually use this when you have a DC offset, when the audio waveform is not exactly in the center, in the middle line. So you can use this here and offset this. So this is why we have this. But the interesting part is we can misuse this by using an LFO. And the LFO here we can use audio rate. So instead of hertz, kilohertz, which gives us already a sound, right? We can use here, for instance, pitch, and maybe an ADSR. So the ADSR modulates from the LFO. Can I open up these two together? Yeah. So the ADSR modulates basically the modulation amount, which is this, and then the LFO itself modulates here the DC offset. And it gives you basically a synthesizer, because now I can just play on the keyboard and I have a monophonic synthesizer. Right? So this is the idea basically, that I use a Polymer synthesizer here like this, and instead of using a wavetable, I use a DC offset wavetable, which is -1, 0, and +1, which emulates exactly just what I did with the DC offset device. But here I need to use the index. So I can put this here on 0, or actually on 50%, and then just modulate, audio rate modulate this here, and then I can utilize this to my advantage. So let's remove here all the modulators, use a wavetable modulator, or wavetable LFO, that's how it's called. But the wavetable LFO goes also into audio rate, hertz, kilohertz, right? But we can use here also the pitch right? So when we have a note input, the LFO changes the frequency exactly to the frequency of the note we are playing. So when I play here C3, I get 262 Hertz out of this. Okay. So with this now we can modulate here the index. So we can change the shape now on the wavetable LFO, which modulates the DC offset wavetable, which itself doesn't produce any sound, but the wavetable LFO here gives us basically the sounds. We have, instead of using the wavetable directly, we use the wavetable LFO to modulate the wavetable. So the big question is now, why should you do this, right? Because we can use now multiple wavetable LFOs instead of just one. And we can go here from this wavetable oscillator into this wavetable LFO, right? So you modulate here the phase. Maybe open up here, or these two. So here we can use a different wavetable. Here we can use a different wavetable. Yeah. So this LFO phase modulates this LFO, and this one phase modulates or modulates actually the wavetable which produces the sound. So with this we can create a wavetable synthesizer with as many wavetables as we want. We can all phase modulate each modulator with itself if you want to do this, right? So we can also do something interesting. We can do a vector synthesizer with this. So this one modulates here the wavetable. Then we have this one here, also modulates maybe this wavetable. And here we use, let's say, a different table. Let's use this one. Also this one modulates here 50%, different wavetable. And another one also modulates here this by 50%. And here we also use something random. It doesn't matter. It's just to show you what you can do. So we have now 4 oscillators here, or 4 LFOs actually, that play with audio rate and modulate this wavetable. So we have the amount here, so we can pull these down. So nothing modulates anything. And in the middle we use an XY thing here, or maybe not an XY, maybe vector 4, something like this. So, and with this we can move around in these edges, and we can use here the top left one to actually change the amount of this LFO. This one changes the amount of this one. This one changes the amount of that one. And this one goes to the this one. Okay. So now we not only can move through the index here on each of these LFOs, we can also morph or vector blend between all of these LFOs that then changes here the wavetable. So we have basically a 4 wavetable oscillator vector synthesizer, which is probably not on the market right now. There's probably something in terms of Eurorack. I think it's called Harmonic Navigator. I think this is something like this. So we can blend over different wave shapes here. So it's very interesting to do, very easy to do. The DC offset wavetable, I put you this in the description below so you can download. It's very simple. It's a very small file, but you can utilize this here for this type of stuff. I made a video about this a few years ago. It's not like that you get any new sounds out of this that you never heard before, but if you want to play around with this and have a bit of fun, you can do it, right? So maybe before I continue here, maybe I use random stuff. Can I open this? Yeah. So this is bipolar. Okay, nice. So we modulate this randomly. And use another one for different seed to modulate this. This is also bipolar. Yeah, okay. And we want to turn the smoothing up. It's maybe too fast. Okay, so we move around here in this XY coordinate system randomly. We can also use then here that for this one. Also polyphonic, this one goes here. Then we copy this here. We move around in this table randomly and also in this table, of course. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 random oscillators here, and they all randomly change the sound. So we change randomly each index, we randomly morph between the positions here and combine everything. This is actually polyphonic. Oh, it's not polyphonic, okay. So we have to switch on your polyphonic mode on each of these LFOs. So now we can play multiple keys. And we need a bit of reverb here, maybe. Super massive. I mean, isn't this not great? I mean, that's the I don't know how any other DAW where you can do something like this so quickly. Okay, it's mind-blowing to me, and I want Bitwig to go back to these great things. I know a lot of people want to have specific workflows, right? MIDI comping and all that crap. I don't need, and I'm okay when it's in there, when it's not getting in my way. But I want to go back to this kind of greatness here, of this modulation system, of having small little devices that you can combine. Maybe give me a nice interface designer where I can design an interface so some beginners have an easy access to these type of tools instead of having here a bunch of modulators, which can look a bit cryptic, but if you know what it's doing, it's very simple actually. So now we turned basically a very simple subtractive synthesizer into a multi-wave table vector synthesizer and also an additive synthesizer where we can control everything about the partials very easily just with a few or with a bunch of modules. It's very great. So this is the Polymer for you. Then there's something like the sampler. Actually, before we start with the sampler, maybe I should record something. Of course, we need something inside of the sampler, right? That's okay. So we record something and we use the sampler. And there was some kind of plugin in the headlines a few weeks ago, a few days ago. I actually have to find here. Can I open this here? Yeah, master recordings. So we can drag this in. So there was some kind of device in the headlines. I don't know what the name was. Solstice, yeah, exactly, this device here. And I tried this out, and what it does, it's basically you have a sample down here, just a sample. And then instead of using granular synthesis to just loop one position here and then scan through the whole waveform, they made this kind of complicated grid here, which is created randomly or maybe on some type of algorithm. And then you move your cursor through this kind of grid, and then you jump from this position maybe to this position or to this position, right? Instead of progressing in a linear way through this sample here. So this is all there is to it. And also it's spectral based. So it's not the granular synthesis type of thing. They say it here, powered by spectral synthesis. Take any monofilament sound, a single note or chord texture and hold it forever without loops or clicks. In my opinion, just taking the waveform at this position, use all the overtones and then sustain these with some type of spectral stuff, usually doesn't sound that great in my opinion. Maybe it's exactly your sound, but I think granular synthesis still sounds a bit better because you have this organic feel to it, because it's a real sample and you loop it. And yeah, so I'm not a big fan of this anyway. So I tried this out here and it kind of works nice, neatly. Maybe it's not worth $85, I have no idea. Maybe I can load it in here. Solstice. Do I have it? Yeah, I have it here. But for some reason it doesn't work anymore. It gives me a browser window. I don't know what I did here. But yeah, it doesn't work anymore. Anyway, so we can actually copy this in a certain way. So what we can do here is we have a sample and we can play the sample. Multiple sounds in there already. So we can use the textures mode, and we have a speed knob and a grain size knob and a motion knob. So what we can do now is we can freeze this here with the freeze playheads. We can click this, and now instead of a speed knob, we have now here a position. And it loops exactly the position where you're at in the sample. And there's also no clicks or anything like this. Maybe when we do the grain size a bit bigger. So what we can do now, instead of progressing here from this position to this slowly, which is not what this plugin does, it jumps from one point to the other, we can just utilize a step sequencer here. And this is basically our grid. Instead of having this fancy GUI grid, which looks nice, it's a nice looking plugin. Okay, I don't want to say it's a bad plugin or anything like this, but I'm just realistic in a way. So instead of having here a nice looking grid, we have just step sequences here, and we can randomize this. Just use this to position ourselves inside of the sample here with modulation. Maybe I close this here for a moment. So now when I hit play, it jumps from one position to the other, more or less, and we can change the path by randomizing this. Now we can also use a different one, a second one here, for the grain size. So the whole point of this plugin here is basically that you can create these kind of pathways and create interesting modulations with that. But here you can do it too. It's maybe not spectral based, but it still sounds great. It does exactly the same thing. And because you have here this randomize or dice button, you can find easily different paths through the sample. And it gives you different rhythmic ideas. And yeah, it's more or less the same thing. So here again, it's very simple, but we can also use voice stacking. So we can say we want to play the sample twice instead of just one instance. We have 2 instances now here. And again, we use the stack modulator. Maybe we can use the stack spread here or the voice control, where we can say the second voice has different options. So here we can say we want to pitch the second version maybe down 1 octave, right? Something like this. And then we want to slow down here this playback speed. Where does it land? I don't know. We have to probably make this per voice. Yeah. You can see as a second playhead progressing in a different speed. And maybe we can say, yeah, also this one, yeah, different position. And maybe this first one is a bit quieter because it's pitched up. Then we can use the smoothing here, so it's not, you know, steps too much. I mean, these are even options you don't have in the plugin, I guess. Also here, reverb. There you go, 2 octaves down. A bit slower. So this is what I mean. You start basically with the plugin. You say, oh, I actually can do this in Bitwig in a certain way, and then you start experimenting, and then you get new ideas, and you add to this idea, and then you get something unique out of it, and you end up in places you don't know you want to go before. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So then there was something yesterday on Reddit here, someone asked, Saturn 2 saturation, how to achieve this in Bitwig, right? So very simple question, and I get something like this all the time. So I said here as an answer, transfer curve or saturator gives you all the saturation types. FX3 gives you the band splitting, just combine it. And yeah, it maybe doesn't give you the interface, the nice, neat little interface of FabFilter, but still, you can manage to achieve something. FX3 here. Multiband FX3. Okay. So here we have the band splitting, right? And then you put the saturator on it. Or what I do all the time is using here a filter plus. And then use the transfer curve to draw in my own kind of shaper curve. For very subtle saturation or maybe some hardcore stuff here, right? Something like this. And then I can say I want to have this. Oh, it's actually not locking in here. Okay. You can have different types at different positions inside of the frequency spectrum, right? You put this then here or here. So it lacks basically the neat little interface of FabFilter, but you can still manage to create something similar and go even beyond that because you can modify it so much. I don't think you can modify the saturation curve inside of FabFilter Saturn 2. I think there are only a few types you can choose, and that's it. Here you can tweak it and twist it and get something new out of it. That's what I'm saying. So this is why I use Bitwig Studio, and still my most loved feature, that you can combine these devices so fast and create something, oh, it's my hair, so unique, easily, without, you know, coding, without going into deep patches or asking people questions. Of course, you have to know some, you need some knowledge. How does a synthesizer work? How does a certain type of effect work, right? But that's why it's great. Why it's great to have Bitwig, because you learn actually how to combine the devices in certain ways to get a certain effect, and then you learn why the effect sounded this way and why it works this way, and why it's not always helpful to just buy a plugin that completely abstracts everything away from you and gives you a nice, simple image, which is cool too. It's not bad, but you don't learn anything. You can't just dissect it. You can just don't put it apart and go in there, exchange things, and that's what's fun. And this is also what gives you, like I said in the beginning, unique sounds. And that's what you want usually. You want to have unique sounds, right? You want to have unique songs. You don't want to sound like any other AI pop song. Maybe that's your goal, but then you probably just use AI. That's what I want to say. That's why I love Bitwig. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If maybe it was too fast what I explained, maybe I should go deeper into some of the ideas there. Let me know, okay? I also here use this kind of click thing here. This one here, the circle. Maybe it was more distracting to you. Some people said they can't actually track my mouse all the time. I'm too fast. Anyway, leave a like, leave a subscription, see you in the next video. Bye.